Outside the Tokyo station, railway station and subway station several floors beneath, all which Misha says was remodeled. The remodeled portion he thinks was horrendously done. I don't know which is which. Okay, this is liver and sauteed vegetables, sauteed liver, and then a bowl of rice. And I think the practice is that you eat the vegetables and then you take a bite of rice to add to it in your mouth, but you don't throw the rice on the plate like I have done for 1,000 years. And then this is a soup that I'm waiting to cool down, and it's very good. Now specifically, the vegetables look like these beans things or whatever they are. I know what they are, I can't remember the name. And it looks like shallots and some slices of carrots to add some color. Bean sprouts. In response to the wind and occasionally to just misadventures, they have provided a device in this little case that you can take out and reach down into this cavity that's so incredibly dangerous and retrieve whatever you've lost. I suppose the only way you'd survive, I think the track's probably too close. Train, but on that ledge there. What's equally interesting is after the train has passed, the last one didn't stop, it just blasted through. Then there's a continuing wind for about a minute, as I guess the tunnel refills from the other end with air that was pushed out by the train, creating the first wind. Interesting, eh? And in some places with the high-speed trains, it was the sonic boom that such a dynamic created when the train came through and exited the tunnel, that they came up with the radical designs that are so beautiful on those Shinkansen trains. This is a magnificent bridge in the small town of Kauai, just before I get off at Kori. So the train station for Kori is right up there, best identified by the 7-Eleven right here, and I'm going right down here, which is pretty much south to the big bridge and across, which is what the blogger said was the starting point. And then I go to the right, which would be to the west, and down along the river. Ho, ho, ho. Notice, big bridge. Now the irony was, he said it was difficult to find, but he may have been referring to the Hatsonu bridge that I'll encounter a little bit later. Hey, looking down to the river from the center of the bridge roughly, and then looking upstream in the direction I'll be going, to the west roughly, to the first little town of Hatnotsu, and then down to another one I can't pronounce, Shiro something or other. So coming off the bridge, I'm immediately confronted by a small roadway down to those people's home. The next little street is this one right here, so I'll just follow. There, an older gentleman with a backpack or day pack and some bear bells on, walked up that stairway into the woods. That could be the trail, but it's not marked as such, so I'll just continue along this road. And just here, a small shrine looks a little bit Buddhist. The blogger said that he crossed the river on that bridge and then followed along this side till he could get down near the river itself. So that's what I'm looking for. There's a pretty little falls that comes off this steep mountainside. Notice this rather elaborate structure for holding in debris that would fall off that cliff face, and yet there isn't much accumulation here. Even behind the screen there's not that much for a relatively modest road. My guess is that this is just a typical reflection of the Japanese penchant for complete function, well executed. And of course, as the road tends to drop, I'm getting closer to the river. This is interesting. You can see some pretty significant slippage downhill of this side of the mountain and consequently the road. So it won't be long before they're going to have to do something significant here. Also looks like they sprayed this with a cohesive that keeps the hillside from sliding all that much. Now it's getting very nicely covered with moss. You can see some pipes that are typical of these kind of slopes designed to siphon water out from behind that sprayed on barrier. Isn't that a pretty little duel of homes, or cabins at least, right above the river? Somebody was planning something they didn't quite get around to finishing, unless they had an overage of stock. Looking back at Kiro, pretty countryside. Steep and rugged. This appears to be a flowering, spindly kind of a tree or bush that's behind that, what looks to be about a 1-inch thick bush, but pretty in flowers. I don't see any indication of trail down on this side of the river, so I'm certainly not going to invest the energy to go down there, and may have to come back up to find out. Here's an additional rather simple and pragmatic, might bother the environmentalists, to use trees and other trees strapped to them as a barrier for falling rock. Just notice this method of having a drain, but a covered drain, and we look down here, you can see the water going through there. How interesting that this design is used all over the world and was used in Roman cities and towns. Well, here we have the first indication of something going down, but it doesn't look alluring enough to me. Doesn't look like that much of a trail to justify the effort yet. This is interesting. What could be it before, and where does it lead? May have something to do with the water system, because water is going through that grate I can hear. What's interesting and peculiar is the extensive clear cutting that I see up through this area, where entire slopes have had every stretch of bit of vegetation removed. Whether they have replanted and whether those are terraces of replanting, I don't know, but it certainly tends to make it ugly considering the alternatives that are available. It's possible that that's some kind of rock quarry also. Probably a family shrine, just a guess. Here I'm coming into a collection of buildings. Another shrine, but what's interesting is how new they appear to be, how sophisticated and polished. Certainly nothing old about them. Some pretty flowers here in this small community. Traditional looking house, I guess. Certainly looks like a traditional structure. Look at the thickness of that reed roof. So here's a sign, but of course there's no way I can tell what it says. You can see here's an icon for hiking, but I'm just guessing that I should be somewhere here. Gentleman, carpenter, was working at his trade and in his shop and saw me and came over and offered to help him. So I tried to tell him where I was going, and he gave me this little piece of map on wood that he whipped out for me. I think I kind of understood what he was saying, but my guess is that I'm just going to kind of angle down to keep trying to stay close to the river in the hopes that there actually is a trail. It sounded like there was a trail on that map. It showed a brown line which seemed to indicate trail, but unfortunately that map was mostly to the east of where I am. It's interesting. It looks like a combination religious bell, but maybe for announcing something, as well as a spotlight there, and then a weather vane and directional device also. This is a very pretty community. People have their own little gardens, which is pretty cool, but very sophisticated, I'm suspecting. In other words, not your ancient rural China. Garden looks like they grow not only the vegetables and so forth, but flowers. Laid out as you would expect here. Again, these pretty flowers all in blossom. Look at that. Look closely at these if we can. Yeah. In the window is a sign read best in English from the other side of the window, but what it says is Snoopy. Here's some pretty flowers with this interesting tree with what look like purple fragile leaves, but maybe flowers, I don't know. And then backdrop by what looks to be a traditional architecture. Notice here that they've got pretty little red flowers or buds or something at the end of these. I'll lose focus here probably if I go too far. There these folks have an outdoor oven, a hibachi type thing for cooking. This is a very old torii kept together probably mostly by the paint for a family shrine. But notice that old tree, or the remains of it, still growing out of the ground, I guess, and capable of spawning that bit of shrubbery. What would have stood here in the past during its entire life? Traditional looking building. Home, perhaps, right next to a modern one. Those pretty bonsai looking trees, aren't they? Look at that flower there. Wonder what it is. What a lovely backyard they have. Now I'm at a triple intersection, so maybe this is what he was drawing right there. So we'll continue this way, which I would have gone anyway. I may or may not be on the train, but there's English here. These are the anomalous surprises of whoever's responsible for signs. Again, what lovely splashes of color as I slowly pan around these rural backyards. And this white tree had obviously been fooling around in some neighborhood bar and managed to mix some genes. I think From the bark, this may be a cherry tree. I don't know, but they're pretty flowers, aren't they? The first hint of, in fact, a possible trail. And these little circles indicate some houses. He was able to say the word house, and these a couple more. I certainly did pass some houses. These probably indicating a street, and there, the trail, and it looks like is going off to the left. Is that what we're seeing right there? So, certainly confirms his great attempt to help me. And here again, a shrine. And now I think I'll get out my hiking gear, my poles and gloves. And almost immediately we encounter this pretty little stream with the little tea falls. I want to walk down here and see what else I can see here. It's interesting because if you look right up there, and even here, it almost suggests that someone has built a wall alongside the stream in the past. And there, of course, the walking bridge.